only difference between those who make it and those who don't is the person who makes it doesn't quit. The person who makes it doesn't stop believing. The person who makes it doesn't let other people's opinion of themselves define them. And that is what Bruce Henderson did. Bruce Henderson was in procurement, and he was obsessed. And I'm going to answer your question right now about the title. Bruce Henderson was obsessed with price competition. He was in procurement, and it blew his mind that two companies would make the exact same product. Because he's in engineering, we're talking about copper wire. We're talking about switch gears. We're talking about things that are so similar. But the companies that produce them have totally different cost positions. He was obsessed about it. He couldn't understand why a company that was 10% smaller than another company could create the same product for a cheaper price. And he started to develop theories about it. And he created the growth share matrix, which became the bedrock of BCG, and also became one of the milestones of corporate strategy in America, which also almost led to their downfall when the Japanese came in, and economies of scale didn't matter, because to the Japanese it was more about efficiency. And anyway, I don't want to get into a whole lesson on corporate strategy, but the reason why that Bruce Henderson rose up was not because he was going after a title, was because he was more interested in knowledge, and he was more interested in building capabilities, and he was more interested in gaining insight. And he didn't really care about his job, to the point where he was so passionate about the cost position of his company that he would get in a fight with his CEO, which would also get him fired most of the time. So this was the most valuable thing to him. And so when you look at leadership, it comes down to value, and what do we value? And most people look at their job as, you know, hey, I want a job. I just want to get to the next level. I want to be something. I'm not taking a stab at you. I'm just saying that when we look at the greats, you know, Einstein never wanted to be a great professor. Einstein just wanted to figure out the space-time relativity equation, you know, and he didn't really care about what people liked or what they didn't like. And so often, we fall into the societal trap of going after a position or a title or a job or even a career. And we forget about what God really created us for, if you're religious, if you're atheist, whatever you desire. But the main thing is having a life's work. And that's what these people did. And this is what society and all the infrastructure around you and all the education and everything that's been fed to you is robbing you of. Because it's not socially acceptable to show up at the cocktail party and say, well, I don't have a job, I have a life's work. But indefinitely, that's what separates those who are great from those who aren't. And at a certain point, you all have the potential to do a life's work, but you're selling that out for a job, you're selling that out for a career. Forget a career, forget work-life balance, forget a job. Start to really think about what's your DNA, who are you, what's your unique value, and follow that. You know, and as soon as you do that, that's when you start to become a leader, because that's when you start to make sacrifices, and you can't have values without sacrifice. And Bruce Henderson sacrificed job and career after time again for what he truly valued. And if you know, when you look at, you know, what's integrity, and a lot of people say in corporate values, we have to have integrity. You want to have integrity? Look at our corporate values. What's your corporate values? Well, we have integrity. And when I interview a CEO, I say, well, what's integrity? He said, well, it's honesty. Really? Honesty really has something to do with integrity? I said, what about the mother bird who faked a broken wing to protect her nest? Does she not have integrity? Is that bird now unethical? Explain it to me. And then the CEO, this is a guy who manages 10,000 people and he's making $1 million a year and blah, blah. All of a sudden he's stumped. And you realize that you don't even know what integrity is. Because obviously the bird's not unethical. Integrity is simply your values and your actions matching. Her loyalty is to her kids. And if she has to lie to someone who wants to kill them, then that's fine with her. Her values match that she has integrity. So at the end of the day, integrity is the hand that shapes your character. And you have to make sacrifices. When Martin Luther King was doing the Freedom March and he got stabbed and he went into the hospital, And people came out and said, hey man, if I got stabbed for doing something, I probably wouldn't do it again. But when Martin Luther King came out of the hospital, he said, I'm ready to die for what I believe in. I'm ready to sacrifice my life. And that's integrity. And that's when his values actually took hold. It wasn't until that moment when his values really took hold, when you really realize I'm willing to die for something. And that's what leadership is. And that's when he becomes the leader, you know, of that movement. That's when he becomes the face of that movement. When Nelson Mandela actually makes a sacrifice and says, I'm willing to be in jail as long as it takes. You know, that's because he becomes the face of equality in South Africa because he made those sacrifices. So until you're willing to sacrifice, until you're willing to have values, you can't be a leader. And when you look at the people who are driving, like Bruce Henderson, the guy was, you know, to him the cost position of the business was like it was the end of nations. You know, if you didn't get this right, and you know, to his point, one of the reasons why the U.S. did so well in the First and Second World Wars, because they could produce product cheaper than any other nation in the world. So to him, it was the most important thing in the world. To me, leadership's the most important thing in the world. If you compare Libya to UAE, not that you can really make that comparison, but Libya had a lot of resources. They had a lot of things going for them. But they didn't have Sheikh Mohammed. You know, you look at Sheikh Mohammed and say, you know, second that guy to any country that's failing, and you're going to watch this thing come through the roof. He's amazing. He's a strong leader, right? So to me, as an executive search professional, leadership's the most important thing. To my friend who's in marketing, branding's the most important thing. You don't have a brand, you don't have a marketing, you're not going anywhere. Peter Drucker said there's two things in business, finance and marketing. But you have your own profession, you have to get that value to the point where this is so important that you want to have a life's work in this field. And that's the people who really rise into the top 1% of their profession, right? And so that's the first answer, the first question, which is how do I get the big title and become a chairman or a title? Jamie Dimon, Warren Buffett and Jamie Dimon, both of them, before they had graduated university, had read over 100 annual reports, and they basically would look at, and in their mind they would rank who the top 4 or 5 CEOs were at writing annual reports. I mean, at what point do you say, oh, this guy's really good at writing annual reports? You're fanatical. You're obsessed to a psychotic level, in my opinion, right? If you actually know it. But that's what success is about. You know, they didn't do it to become CEO of J.P. Morgan. For those people who have no clue who Jamie Dimon is, you know, he's the CEO of J.P. Morgan. He's one of the most successful bankers of all time in recorded history. But it wasn't that goal that drove him. It was the goal of how do you actually run a company? How do you actually manage a balance sheet? You know, how do you really actually make the numbers work? That actually drove him. And so often when you sit down, and my real profession is an executive search consultant. I interview people for you know, large jobs every day. And the number one thing we look for is this. Well, does anyone know what's the number one thing that's going to help you move forward? So this is negotiating your salary. So we'll take